Welcome. Tonight's story is shared gently, like a memory that's been waiting for you to return. Take a deep breath and let it unfold. Part 1. Hello. My name is Diane Fletcher. I'm 55 years old, and I've lived through enough to know when silence becomes a betrayal. I lost my son, and that's a kind of pain no one truly prepares you for. But what his wife did after, that's something I will never forgive. My son Michael and I were close. Ever since he was little, he was my quiet shadow, my soft-hearted boy who loved to draw, who used to leave me little chocolate bars in the kitchen drawer and hug me like he was afraid I'd disappear. I raised him alone. His father left when Michael was 5, and from then on it was just the two of us, me, him, and our little house with the faded curtains and the squeaky porch swing. He grew up into a man any mother would be proud of. He became an architect, bought me a condo 5 minutes from his place, and every Sunday, without fail, he brought me fresh flowers. Even after he got married, he never stopped showing up. He just got better at splitting his time. But she, Kimberly, she never liked me. It was obvious in every word she didn't say. In the way she called me Diane instead of Mom. Or even Mom Diane, which I gently suggested once and was met with a smirk. I kept my distance, told myself he was an adult, that I needed to let go. But sometimes, during dinner, I'd catch him looking at me. That soft, sad look, like he was silently apologizing, like he knew I felt like an intruder in my own family, and I pretended not to notice. Then everything ended. It was a Friday when the hospital called. An accident. A car hit him while he was crossing the street holding coffee in both hands. The doctor told me he didn't suffer, that it was instant. I stood in the waiting room frozen, not believing any of it. Kimberly showed up half an hour later. Not a single tear. Her makeup flawless, her heels clicking like she was walking into a meeting. She didn't look at me, just breezed past like I wasn't even there. When we were finally let in to see him, she stared out the window the entire time. I stood next to him, shaking, trying to hold onto something that was already gone. And when we left the room, she turned to me, calmly, and said, "You can leave now. You've served your purpose." Just like that. No tremor in her voice. No sorrow. I froze. Thought I misheard. But she was already walking away, getting into a sleek black car without looking back. The next day, I was asked to vacate the condo. Turns out, Michael had put it in her name after the wedding, even though he'd promised it would always be mine. Kimberly inherited everything. I got nothing. Not even the ring he wore. Not the sketchbooks from his childhood. Not the family photo that had sat on our old fireplace. She said, "I'm starting over. Without you." I stayed in a cheap hotel for 2 weeks, then a rented room above a laundromat. And then I started gathering everything I had left. Letters, receipts, copies of documents. And one thing she didn't know I had: Michael's handwritten letters. He wrote them to me every Sunday for nearly 2 years. Letters where he told the truth, where he apologized, where he admitted he was tired, that he felt trapped, that he'd made a mistake, that he wanted to change everything. Those letters, they were my truth, my weapon, my proof that I wasn't the one who didn't belong. She was. She had pushed her way into a space that was never hers to own. And now I had something she couldn't take from me. My silence was over. I was going to speak and make sure the world knew who Kimberly really was. I didn't go to the police. I didn't scream on social media. That's not who I am. That's who she is. Loud, curated, polished rage when it suits her. I did the opposite. I visited the lawyer who helped Michael set up his first firm. He still remembered me. I told him I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just needed to understand what had really been signed. And when he let me see the files, quietly, carefully, and that's when I saw it. The transfer of the condo had a witness signature, but it wasn't Michael's handwriting. Not quite. I'd seen his writing my entire life. On birthday cards, on sticky notes, on sketches he left for me when he moved out. This was similar, but not his. My hands went cold. I didn't say anything, just asked for a copy. He gave it to me. I left and sat in my car for almost an hour. If she forged his signature, then not only was she ruthless, she was criminal. But I needed more. I went back through the letters, every one he'd written me. I scanned for dates, details, anything that could contradict what she'd claimed. In one letter dated 2 weeks after the so-called transfer, he wrote, "I want to make things right. I haven't told her yet, but I'm moving the condo back into your name next month." That was all I needed. I started documenting everything. I spoke to Michael's assistant, a kind man who always brought me tea. When I visited the office, I asked him if Michael ever mentioned changing property titles. He looked confused, then said, "He told me he was planning to surprise you with something after your birthday." Was that it? I nodded, my throat tight. Then came the moment I didn't expect. A voicemail from Michael, saved in my phone from a month before his death. I'd forgotten it existed. I played it in my small, rented room, listening to his voice crackle through the static. "Hey, Mom, don't say anything yet, but I talked to the lawyer. You'll get papers next month. I want you to feel secure, okay? You deserve to be safe." I listened to that message 5 times. Then I emailed it to myself, saved it to a drive, printed a transcript. It wasn't about the condo anymore. It was about respect, about truth, about showing that I wasn't the irrelevant woman Kimberly wanted me to be. I booked an appointment with a notary, had my own affidavit signed. Then I contacted someone Michael trusted deeply, his college friend, now a financial consultant. I asked for a meeting. We sat at a quiet cafe, and I laid out everything. The letters, the voicemail, the questionable signature, the timeline. He said, "Diane, this is big. If this gets reviewed properly," and I could see the concern in his eyes, but also the resolve. "I'll help you." Michael wouldn't want it to end like this. I nodded. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from the sense that, for the first time since that hospital hallway, I was moving forward, not away from Michael, but toward the truth. I didn't tell Kimberly what I was doing. I wanted her to stay comfortable, arrogant. That was her weakness. She thought she'd already won, that I was some grieving, harmless mother clinging to memories. But I had something she didn't, the truth, and I was building my case in silence. I met with a handwriting expert, brought them the signature from the property transfer and 3 original letters Michael had written to me. The analysis took a week. When the results came back, the expert looked at me with a solemn face and said, "These signatures were not written by the same person. Whoever signed that transfer, it wasn't your son." My hands didn't even shake. I just nodded and whispered, "Thank you." I had it now. Forged documents, letters contradicting her claims, a voicemail message proving Michael's intentions, and a credible expert's testimony. But I needed to decide what to do with it. Take it to court, publicly expose her, or use it more strategically. The truth is, I didn't just want justice. I wanted her to feel what I felt the day she told me to leave. I wanted her to look at her reflection and see a crack she couldn't smooth over with lipstick and a curated Instagram post. So I made a plan. I reached out to Michael's old firm, the one he helped build from the ground up, the one Kimberly was now trying to wedge herself into. She had started attending meetings, trying to position herself as the grieving widow with Michael's vision. What she didn't know was that I had quietly kept in touch with the firm's co-founder, a kind man named Robert, who had once said to me, "Your son was the best of us." I asked to meet him privately. When I arrived, I handed him a folder. Everything neatly documented. Letters, voice message, handwriting analysis, witness statements, and finally, a signed letter from me, asking for a formal review of Kimberly's role in the firm and any benefits she had received from forged documentation. Robert read in silence. When he looked up, his expression had shifted. "This is serious," he said, "and devastating." I nodded. "I know, but I trust you'll do the right thing." He didn't promise anything. He didn't have to. I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't going to stay buried. I left his office without saying goodbye. I wanted her to hear it from them, to walk into that building with her polished heels and hollow grief, and realize that the walls were no longer leaning in her favor. That someone had spoken, and that someone was me. It took less than a week. On a Thursday morning, I received a call from Robert. He sounded calm, measured, but beneath his words was a quiet storm. "We've initiated an internal investigation," he said. "I thought you deserved to know." I thanked him and hung up, heart pounding. I didn't rush to celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just waited. 2 days later, Kimberly called me. First time since the funeral. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "I think we should talk," she said, her voice tight, rehearsed. "There's been some confusion. I'd like to clear the air." I saved the message without replying. By Monday, news started to leak. I knew people at the firm, assistants, receptionists, people she never even noticed. One of them messaged me. "She stormed out of a meeting today." Red in the face. No one said why. Another wrote, "They're combing through every document with her name on it. You were right to act." I didn't smile. Not exactly. But something in me exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath since the day Michael died. That weekend, I walked past the old condo. The windows were bare now. Her car wasn't in the driveway. A for sale sign leaned against the gate. She was unraveling, quietly, privately, the way she had hoped I would. And I wasn't done, because while she was busy trying to maintain her image, I was preparing the final piece. Not for court, not for vengeance, for Michael, for the truth. A letter, written by me, addressed to him. The last letter. I placed it inside his sketchbook, the one she thought she had taken, but I had scanned and archived years ago. I sealed the folder, labeled it, and left it in the care of a lawyer I trusted. A full record of love, betrayal, and truth. Because I didn't just want Kimberly to lose what she stole. I wanted to restore what had been broken. And as I stepped away from that house for the last time, I knew I wasn't just his mother. I was his voice, and she would never silence it again. This story is just beginning. Diane stayed quiet when they pushed her aside, but now she's reclaiming everything they tried to erase. In part 2, Kimberly's perfect image begins to crack, and someone unexpected joins Diane's side. Stay with us, Part 2. I walked into the firm holding the truth. It started with a rumor, just a whisper through the walls of Michael's firm, that Kimberly might have lied, that there were inconsistencies in her story, that someone had come forward with documents. She had spent months crafting her grief, wearing it like a designer scarf, tasteful, delicate, performative. But grief with holes eventually unravels. I didn't need to do anything. I watched. I listened. And slowly, things began to shift. Her name disappeared from an upcoming board presentation. A charity gala she'd been chairing sent a quiet email stating that due to scheduling changes, she would no longer be speaking. Then came the phone call I never expected, from her sister. We had barely spoken in years, but she called me late one evening, hesitant, her voice low. I didn't know, she said, about the condo, about the signature, about the way she treated you. I didn't speak. I let her fill the silence. She told us you left, that you didn't want to be involved after Michael passed. I believed her. I'm sorry. There was something trembling behind her words, a loyalty cracking, a family line shifting. You weren't the only one she tried to push out. She added, you're just the one who didn't vanish quietly. That call opened a door I didn't even know I needed. Over the next week, little pieces began to surface. People came forward, small things at first. A canceled check that didn't match Michael's handwriting. A timeline that conflicted with what Kimberly claimed. A co-worker who overheard a conversation she thought she understood. Until now, I gathered it all. Quietly, precisely. Not for vengeance. For clarity. Michael had trusted her. Loved her. Even. But in the end, he was trying to undo the damage. And I owed it to him to finish what he started. So I went back to the firm, this time, not through the back door or private meetings. I walked in through the front, head high, folder in hand. Kimberly was there. She didn't expect to see me. For a moment, her face didn't move. Then she smiled. That thin, brittle smile she wore when she lied. Diane. She said, like we were old friends meeting for coffee. I didn't respond. I walked past her, straight to the front desk, and asked for the compliance officer. Her eyes followed me like a shadow. I didn't look back. I gave the folder to the man behind the frosted glass door. Told him, there are things that need to be reviewed. Carefully. He nodded. He'd been expecting me. They all had. Kimberly had painted me as irrelevant, grieving, emotional. But I had become the one thing she never saw coming. Prepared. And she was starting to feel it. I could see it in the way she avoided eye contact when she left the building an hour later. The way she gripped her purse like it could protect her. But the truth doesn't care about clutches or coats or curated reputations. The truth just waits. And I had brought it to the surface. 2 days later, Kimberly called again. I didn't answer. Then came a text. I think we've both made mistakes. Can we meet? I stared at the message for a long time. She wanted control back. She was trying to frame the narrative. To make it look like this was just a misunderstanding between two grieving women. But I wasn't grieving anymore. I was watching. And she was cornered. So I agreed. I chose the place. A quiet cafe near the art museum Michael used to take me to when he was a teenager. I arrived early and sat at a window table. She came 10 minutes late, wearing a cream blouse and oversized sunglasses. She didn't take them off when she sat down. You've made your point. She began. No greeting, no apology. But this is going too far. You're hurting his memory. That made me laugh, softly, bitterly. No, you hurt him. I'm just holding up the mirror. She finally removed the sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with red, but still sharp. You think you're doing something noble, but this will hurt the firm. His name. You'll ruin what he built. I leaned in. Michael didn't build his legacy so someone could forge it and hide behind his name. If that's uncomfortable for you, maybe it should be. She tried to keep her face composed, but her fingers fidgeted with the napkin. What do you want? She asked, lowering her voice. And that was the question she never thought she'd have to ask me, because for so long, I was predictable, quiet, out of the way, but not anymore. I looked at her and said, I want everything that was mine, everything you took, and I want you to step away from the firm, publicly, with dignity, if you still have any left. She laughed then, sharp and cold. You don't have the power to make that happen. I just tilted my head. I'm not the only one who's seen the documents, and every day you wait, more people read them. Her smile faltered. The cracks were showing. You think they'll side with you? You're just the mother-in-law. You don't know how this world works. I stood up, dropped a few bills on the table. I didn't, but I've learned fast. As I walked out, I didn't look back. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need her permission to keep going. That night, I received an email from a junior partner at the firm. Just one sentence. She's not handling it well. I didn't need the details. I could picture it. Her pacing, calling contacts, trying to spin the story before it caught wind. But she was too late. The documents were in too many hands. Now, truth multiplies when it's shared. And this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who had been quietly stepped over while Kimberly played widow and queen. I stayed quiet, let her make her moves. And then, one morning, I received a message that made my heart stop. A young woman named Elise, a paralegal from the firm, wrote to me privately. I knew Michael. He was kind to me when I started. I didn't know all of this, but I believe you, and I think I can help. I met her in a quiet corner of a library downtown. She was maybe in her late 20s, nervous but determined. She brought a folder of her own, copies of meeting logs, emails, expense records, things that didn't match Kimberly's statements. Some of it had been quietly buried. She told us you'd been paid off, that you left willingly. Elise looked ashamed just saying it. But I saw your name on the condo title 6 months before the marriage. Then suddenly it's gone. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. Elise reached across the table and gently placed her hand on the folder. If you go public with this, I'll back you up. I'm not the only one anymore. My throat tightened, not from pain, from relief. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you realize you're not alone in the dark anymore. I thanked her, walked out of that library with the folder pressed to my chest like armor. I didn't rush. I didn't make threats. I just made an appointment with a reporter. Local, reputable. Someone Michael once gave an interview to when he launched his firm. I brought everything, told my story, calmly, clearly, without drama, just the truth. And when she asked me why I was doing it now, I said, because grief shouldn't be a curtain to hide behind, and because he was my son, not her brand. She nodded. She understood. I could see it in her face. When the article ran a week later, The headline was clean and simple. Architect's widow accused of forgery by mother-in-law. New evidence. Raises questions. It didn't need to scream. The facts did the work. The same day it published, Kimberly made her move. Or tried to. She released a statement about family tensions, misunderstandings, and deep sadness. But the words rang hollow, because when the truth is finally visible, spin becomes noise. And the people who once nodded politely to her in hallways were now turning their backs. A week later, Kimberly was asked to take a leave of absence from the firm. The internal memo was brief, professional, and full of polite words that all meant one thing: she was being pushed out. Her social media pages went quiet. The curated posts of grief, of charity appearances, of legacy building, all gone. And then, quietly, without drama, the condo was listed again. This time not for show. She was moving out. Her world, once so carefully constructed, was crumbling under the weight of truth. And I wasn't standing in the rubble. I was standing on the other side. Stronger, clearer, and not alone. Elise sent me a photo of her resignation letter. She said she'd had enough, that she wanted to work somewhere her voice wouldn't be dismissed. Other people began to reach out. Old friends of Michael, people who hadn't known the whole story. They thanked me. Some cried. Some just said, "I always felt something was off, but I didn't know how to help." I didn't ask for their validation, but I accepted their voices, because silence is how people like Kimberly survive. And I had broken that silence. One letter, one folder, one step at a time. And finally, one morning, I returned to Michael's grave. Alone, no flowers, just a folded piece of paper. I sat beside the stone and read it aloud. It was the letter I had written months ago, the one I'd sealed away in his sketchbook. But now I was ready to speak the words. I told him what had happened, what I'd done, what I'd reclaimed. I told him about Elise, about the firm, about Kimberly's unraveling. And then I whispered the one thing I had held back since the beginning. I'm okay now, because I was. I'd been hurt, erased, dismissed, but I was never broken. And I had proven that not through rage or revenge, but by standing still, steady, with nothing but the truth in my hands. As I left the cemetery, the wind picked up, just enough to move the edge of my coat, just enough to remind me I was still here, still standing, and finally free. Di didn't just fight back. She uncovered everything they tried to bury. In part 3, the silence around Kimberly starts to break in public, but one final document surfaces, and it changes everything. Keep watching. Part 3. She thought silence would erase me. The article didn't just shake the ground beneath Kimberly. It sent cracks through the walls she had spent years building. And this time, they didn't stop at the firm. A local radio show picked it up next. Then a blog. Then a former client of Michael's posted a long message about always wondering why Diane disappeared from the picture, and how truth has a way of finding light. I didn't comment. I didn't have to. People were talking, and they weren't asking for her side anymore. She'd made her image so tight, so perfectly manufactured, that when one stitch came undone, the whole thing began unraveling in public. Meanwhile, I was quiet. I went back to walking in the mornings, like I used to when Michael was little and I'd push his stroller round the neighborhood, just to clear my head. Now I walked with purpose, not to escape grief, but to breathe again, to remember who I was before she tried to write me out of my own story. One morning, Elise called. Her voice was calm, but I could hear something different, like she was holding back something big. "Diane," she said, "we found something." I stopped walking. "What kind of something?" "A will," she whispered. "A second one. Michael updated it 6 weeks before the accident. And in that version, you're listed again. The condo, the art, even his shares in the firm. It's notarized. Diane, it's real." I sat down on a park bench. The world spun for a moment, not from shock, but from the sudden click of puzzle pieces falling into place. "Why didn't it show up before?" I asked. "It was buried," she said. "Filed in a different drawer. Mislabeled. Accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally." I closed my eyes. My son had tried. He had fought to make it right, even with everything around him pulling in the wrong direction. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't betrayed me. He just hadn't gotten the chance to finish. But now I had it. The proof. Not just of Kimberly's lies, but of Michael's intent. What came next wasn't rage. It wasn't drama. It was paperwork. It was process. I contacted the estate attorney, set up a meeting, walked in with the documents in one hand and Michael's last letter in the other. And when I handed them over, I simply said, "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to correct what was stolen." The woman across the desk looked at me with something between respect and pity. But she didn't push back. She just said, "Let's begin." The hearing to reopen the estate wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No gavel pounding like in the movies. Just paperwork, timelines, affidavits. And that second will laid out cleanly on the table between us. Kimberly didn't show up. Her lawyer did. A young man with too many files and too little eye contact. I sat with my hands folded, listening as the judge reviewed the documents. He paused at Michael's signature, then again at the notary's stamp. When he looked up, his voice was steady. "There's sufficient reason to reevaluate the previous distribution. I'm granting temporary suspension of Kimberly Litton's inheritance rights pending further review." It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was movement. It was the door opening wider. As we left the courthouse, Elise walked beside me. She didn't say much, just squeezed my arm once. That quiet gesture meant everything. Kimberly's lawyer tried to reach out the next day. An email, then a call. I ignored both. I wasn't negotiating. I was restoring. 2 weeks later, I received notice that the condo was being formally frozen from sale. My name was now legally back in play. I stood in that empty living room, sunlight spilling across the wood floors, and let myself cry. Not because I won something, but because I had walked through so much darkness and was finally able to breathe in a space that had once been mine. Michael's artwork still hung on one wall, a small framed sketch he'd done of a lighthouse. At 17, I left it untouched. Some things deserved to stay exactly where he put them. The firm, meanwhile, issued a statement acknowledging the will's existence and reaffirming their commitment to investigating internal inconsistencies. Kimberly released nothing. No comment. No denial. Just silence. The same silence she had tried to wrap me in when she first told me to leave. But silence feels different when you're not afraid of it. When you've walked through it and come out louder. I was living differently now. Waking up early, making coffee in the kitchen I thought I'd lost. Listening to the creak of floorboards that remembered my son better than she ever had. Sometimes I sat on the balcony and read his old letters, just to remind myself how far I'd come. And other times I sat without reading at all. Just being. Just existing again. Not as a memory or an afterthought, but as a mother who didn't disappear, as a woman who stayed. The strange thing about getting your life back is how quietly it happens. There's no fanfare, no one standing with a trophy or clapping you through the door. Just moments, small, still, ordinary moments that used to hurt, and now don't. I went grocery shopping and passed the aisle where I once broke down, in tears buying his favorite tea. This time, I just picked up a box and smiled. I saw a couple holding hands outside the bakery where Michael and I used to meet on Sundays. And I didn't flinch. I felt grateful, not jealous, not bitter, just thankful that love still existed in the world. Then came a letter. Not from Kimberly, from her lawyer. An official notice. She would not contest the second will. No statements. No further hearings. She would step back, permanently. The last line said, Ms. Litton respectfully withdraws any claims in the interest of preserving her family's privacy. I read it twice, then slid it into a drawer and closed it. I had won without screaming, without stooping, just by standing still when she expected me to fall. I didn't tell many people. Elise knew. Robert at the firm knew. A few close friends who had stuck with me through the quiet knew. That was enough. Kimberly's silence became her legacy. Her sudden withdrawal from public life. Her name gently erased from boards and projects and foundations she once clung to. All of it happened without a headline. But the people who mattered noticed. I received a letter a few days later from one of Michael's old professors. He had read the article. He wrote, Your son spoke of you often. I never believed you disappeared. I'm glad the truth finally surfaced. That one sentence meant more to me than any court ruling, because it told me Michael hadn't been silenced either, not entirely. Pieces of him had lived on in others, and now they were coming back to me. I visited the firm one final time, not for business, just to return something. One of Michael's first sketches, The Lighthouse. I handed it to Robert and said, Put it in the lobby. He'd like that. Robert nodded, eyes glassy. He'd be proud of you, Diane. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked through the glass doors. Sunlight spilling in as if the building itself was exhaling something it had held too long. Outside, I sat on the steps and watched the city move. No longer a stranger. No longer pushed aside. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was looking for something. I felt like I'd finally arrived. Weeks passed. Spring turned to early summer, and the city began to soften around the edges. The condo was warm again. Not just with sunlight, but with something else I hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't wonder what she'd do next. Kimberly had retreated into silence, and silence, finally, felt like closure. I donated most of Michael's things to a youth art program he once supported. I kept a few letters, a sketchbook, and the mug he made me in college. Lopsided, chipped, and still the best thing I've ever owned. One morning, I hosted coffee on the balcony with Elise and Robert. No agenda, no strategy, just coffee, a soft breeze, and three people who had weathered something quietly enormous together. Elise brought me a small envelope. Inside was a folded printout of a message Michael had once emailed her when she joined the firm. Don't let anyone tell you to be smaller. You don't owe them your silence. I pressed it between my palms. Not tears this time, just breath. Calm, steady breath. Kimberly didn't make headlines again. No apology, no public reckoning. But I didn't need it. Her absence was louder than anything she could have said. And my presence, finally, fully, was enough. The truth didn't just restore my name or my place in Michael's story. It restored my spine, my voice, the sense that I wasn't crazy, wasn't bitter, wasn't wrong to question the things that didn't add up. And maybe most importantly, it gave me back the right to remember him on my terms, not hers. Not with curated grief or social pretense, but with memory, complexity, love. I went to the ocean on what would have been his birthday, brought a sketch pad, drew something for him, a bench, a path, a window, left it in the breeze with a paperclip to hold it down, and whispered one last thing before I turned away. You weren't wrong to trust me, because he hadn't been. And neither was I. Diane didn't just reclaim her name, she rebuilt it, piece by piece, in full view of those who tried to erase her. In part 4, everything comes full circle. But one last message from Michael will change how she sees the past and her future. Don't miss it. Part 4. His final truth was for me alone. I didn't expect to find anything else. I thought the story was finished, not in the way I wanted, not with hugs or apologies or full circle redemption, but with quiet resolution and the kind of stillness that comes after a long storm. But life has a way of folding little truths into places you've stopped checking. It happened on a Wednesday, in the corner of the closet I hadn't touched since I moved back in. I was sorting through boxes. Old photo albums, winter scarves, paperwork I kept telling myself I'd file properly one day. And there it was, a small, square envelope tucked between the pages of Michael's old sketchbook, the one I thought I'd already gone through completely. My name was written in his handwriting on the front. Just that. Nothing else. My breath caught. My fingers trembled. I sat down on the floor, legs crossed like I used to sit when he was little and we'd play with puzzles on the rug. I opened it. Inside was a note, not long, not heavy with emotion, just simple, careful words that only Michael could have written. Mom, if you're reading this, it means something went wrong. I wanted to fix it. I wanted you to know I see everything now. I'm not proud of how long it took me, but I see it. You didn't lose me. I just got quiet, too quiet, and I'm sorry for that. I've left something for you. Elise knows what, if she ever comes. To you, trust her. It means I couldn't finish it myself. I reread it 3 times. Then I stood up, walked to the window, and just let myself feel it. The full weight of being known. Even after death, he had tried. He had seen me. And even when I thought I was completely alone, he'd been trying to leave me something that mattered. I called Elise immediately. Her voice cracked when I read her the letter. I wasn't sure if I should tell you, she said. But yes, there was one more thing. We met that afternoon in a quiet cafe tucked behind the courthouse. Elise had a folder in her lap, the same worn leather one she always carried. But this time, it wasn't legal documents or emails. It was a key, a small, brass key with a pink tag. She slid it across the table toward me and whispered, "He asked me to hold this. Told me not to say anything unless..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I took the key, turned it over in my fingers. "Do you know what it's for?" I asked. Elise nodded slowly. "There's a locker at a storage facility in Midtown. It's registered under his middle name. I helped him open it. He told me he was keeping backups there, things that mattered." An hour later, we stood in a cold, fluorescent hallway, lined with metal doors. The key slid in easily, like it had been waiting. Inside the locker was a single fireproof box and a worn duffel bag. Nothing else. I opened the box first. Inside were original copies of every document we'd fought for. The second will, the condo title, firm ownership records, all of it. Signed, stamped, chronologically ordered, as if he knew someone might try to erase the truth and wanted to leave no gaps. But the duffel bag was what took my breath. It was filled with personal things. A photo of us from the summer he turned 12, a small jar of sand from our favorite beach trip, and a worn-out hoodie I used to nag him about never washing. And beneath it all, wrapped in tissue paper, was a painting. One I'd never seen before. Michael had painted it in secret. A scene of our old house, with me standing in the window. The brushwork was soft, layered with dusk light. And in the bottom corner, he had written, "For the one who stayed when no one else did." I didn't cry, not right away. I just stared at it, tracing the edges, committing every stroke to memory. He hadn't just left me proof. He left me love. Tangible, undeniable love. Not the kind you perform in front of people. Not the polished kind Kimberly sold to cameras. But the raw, honest kind. The kind you store away in case the world goes dark. Elise stood beside me in silence. She didn't rush me. Didn't offer platitudes. Just stayed there as I slowly packed the box and painting back up. My hands careful. My heart full and breaking all at once. I brought the painting home and hung it in the quietest room of the condo. The one that still held the smell of old books and late nights. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not Elise, not Robert, not even the woman at the gallery who'd once tried to catalog Michael's early work. This one wasn't for show. It was for me, for memory, for healing. That night, I sat in front of it for hours, studying the window, the way he'd painted the light falling across my shoulder, the slight bend in my posture that he somehow captured perfectly. It wasn't just a likeness. It was a memory from his eyes, how he had seen me. Maybe even when I didn't know he was looking. And as I sat there, I realized something else. He hadn't painted himself into the picture. Not directly. No figure on the porch. No shadow in the yard. Just the house, the dusk, and me. But it wasn't loneliness. It was presence. The whole thing hummed with him. The air, the colors, the stillness. He had turned absence into intimacy. I spent the next few days rereading every letter, every note, every scribble in the margins of old sketchbooks. I started making copies, not to share, but to preserve, to remind myself that this truth wasn't just for this moment. It was for the years I still had left. I wanted to carry it with me. I bought a small fireproof safe and placed it in the hallway closet. Not out of fear that anyone would steal it, but because I knew what it had taken to gather these pieces, to survive long enough to hold them. I left the painting out, though. I wanted to see it every day. It reminded me that even silence can be honest, if it's filled with intention. Elise checked in often. We didn't talk about Kimberly anymore. There was no need. Her silence was its own ending. And besides, I wasn't focused on her. I was focused on what came next. For the first time in years, I started painting again. Not professionally. Not for anyone but myself. I dragged the old easel out of storage, laid down plastic sheets, and let my hands remember. It wasn't about skill. It was about motion. About letting the story keep going in color and quiet. And in every brushstroke, I felt him. Not as a ghost, not as grief, but as a presence that never truly left. A month later, I received a small padded envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in neat script. I opened it. slowly, expecting maybe a belated sympathy card or a forgotten document. But inside was a flash drive and a folded note that simply read, "I thought you should have this." I plugged it into my laptop with a strange mix of hesitation and curiosity. There were two files. One was an audio recording, the other, a video. I clicked the audio first. Michael's voice filled the room. Not from the past, not from childhood, but from just months before his death. He sounded calm, tired, real. "I don't know if this will ever reach you," he said. "But if it does, I just want to say, I'm sorry it took me so long. I believed people I shouldn't have. I let noise drown out your truth. But I see it now. I see what you carried, what you protected, what you were forced to survive. And I want you to know, I didn't forget who you are. I never could." I paused the file halfway through. It was too much, too close. I didn't cry. I just sat still, letting his voice settle into the bones of the apartment, into the walls and corners that had missed him as much as I did. Then I opened the video. It was short, a grainy clip recorded on his phone, showing the inside of his studio. The camera panned slowly, settling on a new canvas. Unfinished, maybe half complete, but the outline was unmistakable. It was me. Not posed, not dressed up, just me, pouring coffee at the counter, back turned, hair up in a messy bun. A quiet moment only someone who loved you would think to capture. He zoomed in, and for a second you could hear his voice whisper behind the lens. "Still the center of everything." That broke me. Not in a loud, crashing way, but in the kind of way that heals. That moment told me more than anything else he left. He had seen me, not just as his mother, but as a person, as someone whole and deserving of love, not obligation. I copied the files to a small hard drive and locked them away with everything else, not because I wanted to hide them, but because they weren't for anyone else. They were mine. His final gift, his truth, unfiltered, and mine to carry forward. I didn't have a big speech prepared when I finally visited his grave. I brought the painting, wrapped carefully in linen, and a small plaque I'd had made with the words from his letter. "You didn't lose me. I just got quiet." The cemetery was empty, the air still, and I stood there for a long time, watching the sunlight filter through the trees like he used to paint it. I told him everything, not with drama, not with tears, just with truth. I told him I forgave him for the years he believed others over me, for the times he didn't call, for the silence, because in the end, he had made it right in the only way that mattered, not by fixing everything, but by choosing me when it counted, when no one else did. I walked home lighter that day, not healed. I don't think grief ever works that cleanly, but steadier, fuller. I hosted a dinner a few weeks later, just a few people, Elise, Robert, and a young woman from the youth art program who'd been inspired by Michael's sketches. We ate at the table I once thought I'd never sit at again. And afterward, I told them the story. Not the legal version, not the edited one, but the real one. They listened, eyes wide, hands still on wine glasses. And when I finished, Elise reached across the table and took my hand. "You didn't just survive," she said. "You outlived the lie." I smiled, because she was right. Kimberly's version of the story didn't last. Her performance, her control, her polished grief. It all crumbled the moment the truth was no longer afraid to stand in the room. And me, I didn't scream. I didn't plot revenge. I simply refused to vanish. I stayed. I spoke. I remembered. And in doing so, I became louder than every lie they ever told about me. So if you're wondering what happened to the woman who was told to pack her bags and disappear, she didn't. She unpacked. She rebuilt. She became the one thing they never expected, the last one standing. She wasn't just erased. She was rewritten. But page by page, Diane took her story back. In part 4, we saw the full circle. A son who tried to make it right, a mother who never stopped believing, and a truth that outlived every lie, whispered behind her back. This was her quiet revenge, not in shouting, but in staying, in outlasting the noise, in being the one who remembered and was remembered. From the author, Twisted Voices. Some women vanish when the world turns its back on them. Diane didn't. She waited, she watched, and when the moment was right, she stood, stronger than grief, louder than betrayal, and braver than anyone ever gave her credit for. Thank you for watching her story. There's more to come.